So we have a cube. We need this to be our build area. The first thing that we're going to want to do is what we did in the prep lesson for this course, the Blender for 3D printing. We're going to go ahead and jump into the scene options here. In scene properties, click the units drop down, and let's change the length to millimeters. So now that we're here, I want to also adjust the grid a little bit. We can set this to 0.1. And now what I want to do is I want to move this cube and resize it because I don't want the grid going through the cube. It's just kind of annoying to have that in my face the whole time I'm trying to model. I want the grid to actually be on the floor. Since we're here, I'm going to show you, I know this isn't a modifier, but I just want to show you, if you know the approximate width of something and you can't just, if you want a really fast way of moving the object to the floor and leveling it, then what you can do instead of trying to figure out exactly how high you should move it is take the entire z height of the object and divide by 2. So in this case, 2000. Now you can do that math in your head, obviously, but there are some objects with some things where it's just really hard to divide by 2 and figure it out because you'll be working in decimal places, and sometimes it's hard to brain decimal places. Okay, so now we have this, and we're going to go ahead and go to the object properties in the property stack. And in the object properties, what we want to do is we want to change this to display as in viewport display. We want to set this to bounds. Now that we've done that, we can resize this object. So you have a few options to resize it. The fastest and easiest way is to come up here to your transform pivot point, and you can click on that and set this to your 3D cursor. And if your 3D cursor is somewhere else instead of where the origin center is, then what you can do is you can snap cursor to world origin. It'll put it right there. And now when you resize your object, it will scale or resize to that. So we can bring this down. I'm going to bring it down to 256, and you can guess what printer that's for. Okay, so now that I've got it scaled, I want to go ahead and apply the scale, even though it's not particularly important. We're not going to be adding modifiers to this. But I do want to go up here to the filters toggle, set our restriction toggle for selectable, turn that on so we can use it. And now I want to disable this, but I want to go ahead and rename it first. Let's see, bound build. Nope, that's not it. There we go, build area. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make it not selectable, and I'll turn it off for rendering too, just because. I want to show you subdivision modeling in all of its glory with something really simple. You actually saw this earlier on my Twitter feed if you were looking. If you weren't, that's okay, but if you want to follow me on Twitter, that'd be great. eMedia Tweets is my Twitter, or you can go to everlasting.media and find the link. So now GZ, to move it up, would get it flush again. We have a 200 millimeter cube. I want to go ahead and resize this cube down to 180. I was going to do 185, but yeah, let's just do 180 straight up, and then 180 divided by 2. So you can do math operations in these fields. That's pretty cool, and there's some other stuff you can do with them. That's pretty cool as well. Okay, so I want it 180 millimeters tall, and then we're going to change its width and height. Now, I could do that here, but if I apply my scale, I can also do it here. And if I scale it on the X and bring it in, let's see, something like that, and then I can scale it on the Y, something like that. Doesn't have to be precise. We can see our dimensions here, but now we don't have to stress out about it fitting in our build area. We know it's going to fit in our build area. So the next thing that we can do is, if we go into edit mode, we can add a loop cut vertically. And I'm going to show you the power of switching between. You might see me switch between like material preview, wireframe, or solid. So I'm going to switch to wireframe. And in wireframe, you can select through the object and get the vertex behind it. Now, I'll show you what happens when we're in solid mode. You try to select it, that vertex didn't get selected. There's a way to fix that if you turn on X-ray. It's kind of a cross between wireframe and solid mode or material preview mode. So you can turn on X-ray and you can work that way, and then you can always turn it off if you get annoyed by the holographic effect to it. Since we're here, I'm going to go ahead and set a matte cap, and we'll put it on, gosh, I don't know. I like this one. Yeah, we'll use that one for now. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'm going to delete these vertexes on the right side. Oh no, you deleted half your vase. Yeah, that's fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the modifier stack and the property stack, and I'm going to add a mirror modifier. Now, if you can't find it, you can just type M, and that'll come up. But if you're looking for a mirror modifier and you can't find it right away, you just go down to each of the values, and then you will eventually find it, but it's under generate. And there are a few things that you can do. If you happen to be mirroring along the wrong axis, that's okay. You can select multiple and just click again to deselect the ones you don't want. Okay, so now we can go ahead and set this up with some more loop cuts. So I'm going to add a few more here. Yeah, let's do that. And then I'm going to add one more vertical. I'm going to delete these top faces. We don't need them. And now I'm going to try to get the general look of our vase figured out. So the first thing I want to do is bring in this mouth. I'm going to bring it in quite a bit. Then I can bring that in just a little, and then I'm going to bring this in quite a bit too. And we're going to create a kind of loop right here. Bring this just a little bit more. Okay, and then the base, that's pretty good, maybe like that. Okay, now what I can do is I can select both of these faces right here, and I can just delete them. So with these faces deleted, and with the mirror modifier there, it can be a little confusing. But if I select the near edge and the far edge, if I hit F, I can fill. And I'm going to rotate just a little bit just to get a better view. And if I select this edge, going the direction of other edges that need to be filled, I don't have to, like I can select these edges and I can fill like this, but you don't have to do that. If you just select an edge in the direction of more edges that need to be filled, and there's quads to fill, it will, if you just hit F, it will continuously fill those quads until you run out. And I can give you a better demonstration of that. If I take a circle, I'll move it over here, and if I shift D in edit mode, you can see, if I shift D, duplicate that, if I select one edge here, and hit F, that'll work. But I don't have to keep selecting edges like that. All I have to do is select an edge in the direction that I want to fill in, and it will fill as long as there's quads to fill. It might even do tries to finish up, but it will go all the way around, and then it'll stop. It won't keep going. So that's a really quick way of connecting to two joints. Now, there are faster ways of doing large areas to fill, and I'll show you grid filling and all that stuff. We'll probably do it here in a minute for the bottom. Okay, so now that we've gotten that done, what I want to do here is I want to add a loop cut on the inside of my object. And you'll notice with the mirror modifier that if I scale this, well, first of all, I need to change my transform pivot point back to median point. It's currently still on cursor. If I scale it, it'll scale towards the center, but then I end up with these gaps. Well, to fix that, what I can do is turn on clipping in the mirror modifier, and you may want to get used to just toggling this on and off. So now that I've done that, if I GX and I move towards the center, eventually it will connect. And I'll turn off X-ray just so you can see that a little bit better. If I add a loop cut right here, I can now select this. That goes all the way across. And I want to select the other one down here with Shift and Alt. And I want to bring these in, so GX. And now if I grab these edges in the top and bottom, SZ, and now we have, it almost looks like a game asset, to be honest. So I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm going to add a loop cut along the vertical on the outside as well. GX. And now that I've done this, I have my general shape of the vase that I'm going for. The mouth might still be a little too big. Never heard that before in my life. So now if I want to add subdivisions, I can add it over here with the menu, but I can also just hit Control 1, 2, 3. I can even go up to 4. 4 will get it pretty smooth. That looks pretty sweet. The bottom is a problem though. This will not 3D print well. It'll be kind of rough on the bottom. And if you've ever 3D printed things with round bottoms, you know what I'm talking about. Typically, well, some printers handle it better than others. Moisture in your filament can have something to do with it. Your settings can have something to do with it, print speeds, etc. But we can go ahead and make a flat bottom so we can get good bed adhesion without the need for a raft or supports. If we select these edges, and I can do that just by holding Alt and clicking each edge group while holding Shift as well. Then I can increase the mean crease in the edge data parameter. If I increase it all the way, we'll have a nice rounded bottom. If I increase the mean vertex crease, it will make a jagged pointed bottom. You may want that, it's up to you. But I'm going to go ahead and leave mine rounded. So the next thing I want to do, oh, by the way, if you want to see what this looks like smooth, you can always right click and shade smooth. But it may not be representative of what actually gets sliced or what prints. I find that flat is usually more accurate, closer to what I can expect whenever the print is finished. But it really depends on it depends on your slicer and your 3D printer calibrations and how much of the actual real model geometry makes it through the slicer into your print. So there's a couple things we can do to fix that. You can add more subdivisions, but I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to actually go down a subdivision, and I'm going to leave it just like that and put it shade smooth. So now that we've completed this, you can see we're about 13 minutes in. We've got a nice model, and we only have 2 modifiers. But I want to show you a couple more things. Now, I've done a twisted vase tutorial in the past. I'm going to go ahead and move this over. I'm going to make it not selectable. We'll just leave it active for now. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a cylinder. I'm going to bring the cylinder up 100. And I'm going to show you how to scale. I'm not going to use the transform pivot point again. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to hit S, hold Shift, hit X, and then I'm going to hit Z. And then I'm going to release Shift, and it looks like I need to do that one more time. So I'm just going to hit S, Shift, X, Z, let go of Shift, and now I can actually scale it faster. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so you've seen some of the ripple vases and chevron vases and whatnot. I'm going to go ahead and delete this top hole, or this top face. And now, so I have the basic profile. What I want to do in edit mode is I want to add some loop cuts. I'm going to try to make a set of grid squares. There we go. That's pretty close. So now I have the geometry I need to go ahead and create my little tree trunk ripple vase. I don't know what to call it. Twisty vase, I'm not sure what to call it yet. But we're going to go ahead and add a triangulate. And this will add some more geometry. It might not be visible in your solid mode, but in wireframe mode, you'll definitely see it. We'll go back to solid for now. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a displace modifier. So the displace modifier is going to blow out, it's going to totally blow out your whole model and make it ridiculous. So what we can do is we can shrink this to a negative value. Sometimes working with negative values is easier than working with the positive values. And you'll notice that across the board, especially whenever you're dealing with textures. Okay, so now that we've done that, I want to set my mid-level to 0. That's going to blow it out. It's not going to look normal yet, but once I actually create the displacement texture, the displacement map, it will. So now that I've created that texture with the new button there, I can name the texture right here, so displacement. And then the texture panel at the bottom of our property stack list, that tab will allow us to select what type of noise texture we want to use. You can import noise textures from other programs if you want to, but I'm just going to create one here in Blender. That already looks cool, to be honest. I want to see if I can 3D print something like that. But what I want to do is I want to bring this intensity all the way down to something like that. I think that's probably about what I need. 0.0908, something like that. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want to bring the size as small as possible. And I think that's good. Nabla can be 0, it doesn't do anything for this. So back in the modifiers, the model doesn't look great. And it's already messing up our bottom, and we really don't want that. Remember, the bottom is, for bed adhesion. So let's clean that up first before we do anything else. The first thing I want to do is I want to Alt and left click on that edge to select that edge loop. And then I'm going to Control I, and that's just a quick shortcut for selecting the vertexes we actually want to select. Sometimes it's easier to select what you don't want and then invert your selection. So then if I go to Control 1 in edit mode, now in object mode, Control 1 adds a subdivision, but in edit mode, Control 1 sets between your 3 different selection modes, Control 1, 2, 3. So now that I have just the vertexes selected, in our property stack, if I come down to Data, Vertex Groups, and I click this little plus button right here, it's gonna add a vertex group. Then I can name this displacement. And if I click assign, then it will assign those vertexes to that vertex group. So I can quickly check by clicking off or hitting AA and hitting select with that vertex group selected, and it will show us what vertexes belong to that vertex group. So now that I have that done, if I go back into object mode, I can go to the displacement modifier, and in the vertex group dropdown, select our displacement group. And now the bottom will remain unaffected. For the most part, it can still be affected a little bit by some things. We have other modifiers coming in that could do things. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a subdivision surface. And like I said, there are other modifiers that can affect it, but we know how to correct this already from the previous model. All we have to do is go back into edit mode, select that loop, increase the mean crease in our edge data, and now it's no longer affected. We can also go back to the mid-level setting on the displacement modifier, and if we just ever so slightly, we can hold shift, ever so slightly increase it, it will allow us to kind of even up those outer walls. Cool. Now that looks pretty neat in Blender, but it's not going to look great 3D printed. Let's go ahead and get that fixed up. So I'm going to increase this subdivision level to 2. Okay, so we still need to do a few things before we keep adding subdivisions. I'm going to go ahead and collapse the triangulate, displace, and subdivision modifiers. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a simple deform. This is how you get your spirals, your twisty stuff. I'm going to go ahead and set this to the z-axis, and I'm going to set it to 180 degrees. And you can see already we're getting some really good results. Very twisty, very nice. If we look at the geometry, it doesn't really show much. The subdivision modifier has an optimal display setting. If we disable that, we can see the real geometry that's going into the model. Very noisy. We'll go ahead and re-enable this, collapse our subdivision, and I think we can go ahead and collapse our simple deform. So a really cool way of managing your modifier stack, if you want to duplicate your modifiers or copy between objects, you can totally do that. All you have to do is Shift D on a modifier with your cursor in the modifier stack, and it will duplicate your modifier, and then you can move it where you need it in the stack. I'm going to go ahead and bring it down and then set this to 1. And you can see with it disabled, you could still see those distortion patterns from the geometry. If you enable it, a lot of those distortions just disappear. They're gone. And it looks really, really cool. Neither of these objects have solid faces. I'm going to go ahead and re-enable this other base real quick. So both of these models, if you look at your overlays, you can see the face orientation. This model is completely inverted. Let me flip that. F3. If you end up with your normals inverted, okay, so F3 will open this fuzzy finder, and this will allow you to do all kinds of destructive operations. If I flip normals, there we go. Okay, so that about covers it. I was going to cover a few other things with slicing, but I think I'm going to save that for another episode. We're already at over 20 minutes for this this lesson, but I just want to let you know if you have issues with the level of subdivisions. I'm going to go ahead and disable this second vase here. So if you load the blend, don't be surprised that it's not showing up. It's still here. You just have to go and re-enable it right here. Okay, once you do that, then you can select it and export, and I'll show you how to do that in another episode, in another lesson. But for now, I'm just going to leave this object enabled with its subdivisions. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this down to 2, and you can increase it if you want a more smoother surface. And you can see what that looks like if you just add a couple of subdivisions. Very clean. You may not need it, depending on which slicer and 3D printer you're using. You may not see these mesh artifacts whenever you're printing this. Just want to let you know about that. In any case, that's been it for this lesson. I look forward to the next lesson. I'm going to cover how to set up your model to actually be sliced. We'll cover exporting, and we'll go from there. All right, guys, take care.